Welcome, my brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, to the real world with Elder George. I'm Elder George, and I have a message for you. A message which I hope you're getting to know from memory. And that message is, in order to have a happy, healthy, harmonious human environment, there must be spiritual awareness, gender understanding, and family focus. Now, in my last video, I mentioned the importance of building family, but that the impediment to building family was the government. So we're going to discuss a little bit the effects of what the government does. And one of the main things, or one of the main effects of government activity is what I'm calling the prison population. The prison population. Take a good look at this, folks. Right? You will find that in 1925 there were 100,000 Americans in prison. 100,000 in 1925. Now, about 50 years later, in 1976, there were 250,000 Americans in prison. Okay, you will notice the population almost doubled, so it seems that it didn't go up that much. However, I will share with you that at that time, the Encyclopedia Britannica stated 250,000 men in U.S. prisons is a very, very high prison population by most standards. Now remember that. 250,000 men for that population was very high. Now you're going to see that I went up in jumps of 8 years. I did this because there were different presidents in power at the time, and none of them good or bad. I just happened to pick 8 years because I wanted to show the difference with each administration. So, in 1984, just 8 years later, the prison population doubled from 250,000 to 500,000. It's a huge doubling. 250,000 more people were put in prison. Then it doubled again, from 250,000 to 500,000. And then it doubled again to 1,000,000. And then it doubled again to 2 million. And now we're at 2,300,000. So since the first figure on here, right, the prison population went up 23 times. And our population just about tripled. There's something wrong there, wouldn't you say? Something very wrong. Now, they've tried to make a racist thing out of this and saying, well, it's the black population was having problems and what have you, and we needed the Great Society legislation and all that kind. You remember all of that? Okay. I wrote a little booklet about that, which we will discuss later on. But first, let me read the foreword to you. In 1965, right, the well-being of the African American was at its zenith. The unwed motherhood rate was 25%, high for the time, but low when compared to the destruction of the family that occurred during slavery. His economic level improved gradually, not only in the industrial North, but in the South as well, where he owned businesses, hotels, and banks, even though he did not receive any governmental assistance, while laboring under the indignity and restriction of segregation. That's 1965, folks. That's when you saw the prison population was low on the charts that I just showed. By the year 2000, the unwed motherhood rate among African Americans had risen to 70%. And in some pockets, such as Harlem, it reached 90%. The prison population more than doubled, with most of the increase coming from the African American community. Oh, by the way, something I neglected. In 1925-26, the racial mix in U.S. prisons was normal. Black people represented 11% of the population. They made 11% of the prison population. There was no prejudice or imbalance, racial imbalance. The prison population more than doubled, with most of the increase coming from the African American community. Black inner cities became large de facto matriarchies, with nonprofit organizations providing aid and influence to every facet of African American life. The Civil Rights Act and the Great Society legislation emasculated the male, all males. It destroyed the family and re-enslaved black people. The government and media responsible for creating this condition fanned the fires of racism in order to draw the nation's attention away from their actions. This little book will describe how this re-enslavement was accomplished. Now, a couple other little excerpts that I want to share with you. Once the male is removed from society, standards collapse. And one of the first standards to collapse in society is the educational standards. The academic performance of children in the Washington, D.C. school district, which meant black children, and symbolized what was happening to the education of black children throughout America, had reached such dismal levels that massive financial expenditures were injected into the school system in an attempt to improve academic performance. In the early 1990s, per pupil educational expenditures were the highest in the nation. I won't go into all the details here. Were the highest in the nation. This massive spending on education in the DC school system resulted in the following performance. In 1992, average math set scores were the lowest in the nation. 8th grade math proficiency, lowest in the nation. 4th grade math proficiency, lowest in the nation. It was a dismal failure. Now I'll give you another statistic that you don't hear about from the government. When fathers are at home, the school dropout rate is cut in half. Teenage pregnancy rate is cut in half. Truancy decreases. Academic performance increases. On-time graduation increases. And juvenile delinquency decreases. These statistics hold true regardless of class sizes, teacher salaries, and educational facilities. There's a point to be made here, folks. The Civil Rights legislation of 1965 neutered the male, kicked him out of the house, the family broke down, the black woman's substitute husband became the government. The government is now running society, and we are collapsing all the way around. Folks, I just mentioned what has happened, a few of the things that had happened as a result of the civil rights legislation. Now, think of what my message has been these many past weeks. Spiritual awareness, gender understanding, and family focus. Don't you see that with all government involvement, legislation, and what have you, none of those three things are even mentioned? Who talks about spirituality? Who talks about gender understanding? The phrases, we don't need men anymore. Who talks about family focus? Just get up and go out and earn a living, what have you. Now, there are many other aspects of society which I have discussed in this little booklet. And I realize now I need to make another video. It would be too long to get into in this video. I will just briefly say to you, if you go to my website, you will find on the home page a heading, Mini Books. This mini book costs $3, or sells for $3. I have to put it in an envelope and put a stamp on it, so I sell it for $4. I'm really not interested in selling a mini book. I offer a discount schedule beginning at 50, 100, and so on. I go up to 1,000 or more. If you buy as little as 50, you're only paying $2.40 per booklet, and that's freight included. Perhaps you could order 50 and distribute them through your church or synagogue or mosque or homeschooling organization or many other organizations that you belong to, where you feel that people would be interested in this message. And it's only $3 a book, or however you want to distribute it. If you order 1,000 of them, you get them at half price. So think about that. I will make a follow-up video to this. My next video will be a follow-up to this, to go into more details as to what's happened to our society, why we have the large prison population, why the home has broken down, why many other things are occurring. All right, so it's the re-enslavement of the African American. Look it up on my website, please, and we'll be getting together again real soon. Thank you. Dear viewer and or listener, an important part of our message consists of an explanation of the principle of gender, which I have incorporated into my 2 books. My first book, Dear Brothers and Sisters, explains gender differences and the realization that they are part of a universal principle. My second book, A Gender Handbook for Western Man, is not really a handbook, but it does explain gender in a more technical manner, which I felt was more receptive to the Western understanding or the Western mind. Both books can be obtained quickly from Amazon.com or Barnes & Nobles. I hope that you invest in both of these books and increase your awareness and understanding of the principle of gender and its effect in your life. Thank you.